Good morning and welcome to the Five Stones podcast. I am Colin Hedegaard, known as the Great Dane. With me, these gentlemen can introduce themselves.
I'm Joe Trester. I'm the real estate advocate.
I feel bad because I'm Raymond Modglin, but we've got all our cute little names. I'm the real estate monkey.
He is, in fact.
A lot longer than the advocate or the Great Dane.
Yes.
We have some different smokes today for those of you that are curious. This is a Sancho Panza Double Maduro Toro size.
I've got a proprietary blend that was made for the Cigar Club of Indiana. So I'm trying that out to see what it's like. If it's good, it may become available.
There we go. And I'm smoking a JFR cigar today. Just decided to switch things up a little bit. Can't always smoke the same thing. Got to try something a little different.
I like the JFR cigars. They were probably my go-to cigars for a long time.
Yeah.
I've never had the, what'd you call it? Double Maduro?
Sancho Panza Double Maduro. It's all right. It has a little bit of a tough draw in the beginning, and then it gets...
Yeah.
It seems dense.
It's, the double
Seems
Maduro,
double as everything else.
It's a little heavier and drier, and it's just a different style of smoke.
Do you, obviously this is being filmed, they don't know, in the morning hours, so you start out,
I start out with the same stuff I smoke all day.
so do I.
Same stuff.
Yeah.
So do you?
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to a beginning cigar guy the other day, and I kind of told him what I had learned, that, in the morning they say, and I don't know who they is, that you should start light, like maybe a Connecticut wrapper in the morning, and as the afternoon goes on, you should not start dark and go lighter, because once you do a darker cigar that's a little heavier, your taste buds become accustomed to that. And I guess I would equate that to, like I told him, like coffee. But I know you and I drink coffee, black coffee from the beginning.
Day and night.
Day and night, yeah.
I
You're
don't
not
agree.
a coffee guy, though, are you?
I have my moments, but I have to have lots of creamer.
Yeah.
in it. So it's mostly cream with a little bit of coffee as opposed to...
So, you do that when your vagina hurts?
Yes. Yes. Exclusively.
But a Padron may taste a little different in the morning. It may be a little stronger when my mouth is not,
Yeah.
destroyed.
But I drink black coffee all the time, but I do smoke the same cigar. And I think as you, like coffee drinkers, you start out cream and sugar, and then eventually you work your way up after a couple of years to just black. I think cigar smokers are the same way. Once you're in it for 10 or 12 years or longer.
You want the full power.
Yeah.
I get it.
So, and there's a next level above this, and you love those Digger cigars.
Gigantic. Yeah, they last 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a slower smoker, but they're big.
That is one that I don't know if I necessarily not recommend, but you definitely have to, A, be a cigar smoker, and B,
Have a full stomach.
have a full stomach, because you can get kind
You'll
of
get
queasy.
green real quick.
Kind of get queasy. And there's a new one out by Asylum, which is a 10-inch by 100. Now, cigars are ranked, and we're way off what we were going to, but cigars are measured in rings. Like a 60 ring is 1 inch, and this is a 100 ring. So it's 1.5 inches wide by 10 inches long.
Yeah, it seems a little much.
Yeah.
It's like smoking an exhaust pipe.
Yeah, I knew a guy that had one, and they said he smoked 3.5 hours on it and had to quit, and still had about 1.5 inches or 2 left on it. So, by Asylum, and that they make some good cigars that are the 60 by 6 inches, so it's 1 inch around. This is their new one, which is a 100 ring cigar. So, but that's not why we're here today.
We are glad to be back. It's been a little over a month. We've had vacations and fall break and everything else, so it's nice to get back in the swing.
Yeah. So today I want to talk about the NAR's lawsuit that is going on And if you're in the real estate world, which would incorporate the financing,
Yes.
this is going to be a huge change in the business model, and I predict will upend the real estate world for 3 or 4 years.
Easily.
At least the business of being a realtor, it will upend that part. Maybe not so much, the mechanic of the sale, but how a real estate agent works is going
It
to
hit the
change.
mainstream media this week. We saw it on MSNBC,
Yeah.
watching with our financial guy.
And the article was in Wall Street Journal either
Monday.
on Monday.
This past Monday.
What was that?
That would have
October.
been the 23rd of October.
The 23rd of October. If you go to the Wall Street Journal, there's a big article in it. So the basis of the whole crux started with a Kansas City federal judge who said he would hear an antitrust suit that the people are claiming artificially, that the buyer's agent commission artificially inflates the price of the house because they are being forced to pay it without negotiation of that price. That's the basis of it. Now, the mechanics part is amazing to me, and maybe I'm just a little weird. The fact is there are 260,000
People signed up to
Yeah.
be
Plaintiffs for the class
Yeah.
action lawsuit.
So, I mean, just think of that number of transactions that those attorneys had to find to even file this class action. I mean, it wasn't like it was 100. It's 260,000.
Theoretically, they should have to have some standing, right? So maybe bought a house in the last 10 years. Or
Oh, I'm sure those were all transactions.
Yeah.
Mainly Kansas, but they did name a couple in Missouri and Illinois, I believe, to the tune of $40 billion in commissions over the last 5 years, since like 2018 is when this goes back to. Now,
This hit the mainstream news because 4 real estate companies and the NAR settled one of these lawsuits.
and because New York, the state of New York, have already announced their changes starting January.
well, actually 17 states have. I've already
We
changed
just
it.
heard about New York.
Yeah, well, I've heard about more because
Who's your special?
I studied before we came here.
But the Department of Justice is examining this as a potential thing to change
Yeah.
the national state.
And so Anywhere Realty, which used to be Reology, which used to be Cendant, which owned Century 21, Caldwell Banker, Better Homes and Gardens. They were one of the people. Keller Williams was one, Remax was one, and then there was a third one I didn't recognize, a fourth one I didn't recognize. And the NAR have all settled one of the lawsuits to the tune of $138 million they paid out prior to even going to court. So that's a big number. That's not like go away money. That makes me think that they believe that there's a violation.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted someone to go away, you'd offer them a couple million. 138 is a big number. And I think they settled that because they know there's a problem.
I would agree with
Yeah.
that.
Part of the argument is it's baked into the value of homes
Yeah.
and artificially pumping them up. But every comp, every transaction since this has been the way of things.
Well, we
is
can
that way.
start down the path because there's a whole bunch that's going to be involved in this, including the circular mindset of when you see one answer, it's going to cause a problem somewhere else. The first one's that one. Well, the sale of my house this year is based on comps last year. Well, the problem is those were based on comps in 2018, and you can play that game all the way back. So theoretically, houses have been artificially inflated since 1916 when the NAR came in, and I think it was 16, it might have been 1912. I should know that. But it's one of those two dates. Ever since then, the housing market has been inflated. So what the NAR has done has actually changed their stance on a couple of things already here in mid-October. One of the most common things that we used to be able to do as a licensed agent, as a listing agent, we would negotiate a commission, and let's just say for this conversation 6%, we would then give away half of that, 3%, to the buyer's agent. Well, the problem lies in the fact is that 3% was set by a listing agent, and the buyer who ultimately is paying this money.
Yes.
I mean, that's a hard concept for people to say because we ask them all the time, who's paying the commission? Everybody says, well, the seller is. No, the seller's using the money the buyer's giving him.
Yep.
So the buyer's actually paying this commission
For both sides.
And doesn't get a chance to negotiate it. That's the general layman's easy way to understand of what the complaint is.
So the buyer's paying $94,000 for the house and $6,000 for the realtors.
Right.
When they bring
on a $100,000 house. That's where the artificially inflated theory comes from.
Well,
that house is worth 94, but they got to sell it for 100 to pay the 6% that the listing agent negotiated, and the buyer's paying the fee. So what the New York stance is, starting January the 1st, is that the seller will now negotiate a listing commission with the listing agent and a separate commission with the buyer's agent on what they are going to pay.
So here is my. There's a multitude of issues that I have
Yes.
with this. But the other issue I still have is even changing it to that. The buyer still has no option to negotiate what the seller agent is getting or the listing agent is getting. So they're still going to be inflating the cost of the house by what the listing agent is asking for. So it's still going to be inflated. So maybe we're cutting it in half. It's still inflated.
Yeah. It's going to be.
And someone still has to pay that agent. And now they're going to have to pay it out of their pocket if they don't want to roll it into the cost of that. So now they're going to have to come with more money.
I think I started this with saying there's a circular
Yes.
pattern here.
So
because that's going to lead you to, like I said,
By helping themselves, they've hurt themselves.
that's going to lead you to other issues. What I believe the easiest answer is going to be, that we have kind of already talked about, is the purchase agreement concept, where we were not allowed to negotiate commissions within the purchase agreement. That concept is going to have to change, I believe, because that's going to now make it one of the points that a buyer says, I want you to, fix this, I want you to do this, and I want my agent to be paid 3%. And that's going to just be another term within the purchase agreement. That's going to be the easiest of all the worst ways there are, I think. But that's going to make the NAR have to change their policy once again on allowing that. Now, the policy they did just take a different stance on was, up until now, the listing agent had to co-op out to the buyer's agent. They had to pay them something, all right? And now the NAR has changed their stance as of the middle of October, that the listing agent is now allowed to offer 0% as a commission. So they can now not split the commission.
Yes.
That was one of NAR's things. The other thing the NAR agreed to, there was 4 main areas in that lawsuit that Colin was talking about. They agreed to now allow non-MLS members access to houses via the lockbox system. Used to be, they wouldn't allow that. That violated antitrust because it was discriminatory to agents that were not a member of a local board, or a local board like the Bloomington board or Fort Wayne board. But now they're going to have to allow that because ultimately that would hurt the buyer.
Yes.
That's the claim. If the buyer couldn't see the house because the agent wasn't a member of that board, they were being denied access. Now that's going to change. One of the other changes was in the MLS system back room where agents could see, they were allowed to sort properties by the buyer's agent commission that was given, so they could sort to the highest, like, oh, that one's paying 3, this one's paying 2, and that would, then agents would go, well, here's these 4 houses, and not show them these bottom ones. So they're going to disallow us now to see that commission, I believe, in the sorting process, so all the houses just come up, and now we just send them all to the client.
Realistically, there won't be a point in even posting it because it isn't going to matter if it's going to be negotiated anyway.
Well, New York, here's another question. New York said that they were going to not allow the listing agent to share commissions.
Correct.
There's a big difference between not allowing it and not recommending they do it.
Yep.
Because if they don't allow it, then yes, it forces that conversation between the buyer's agent and the seller. Whereas if they said, okay, we don't recommend it, then a good listing agent under a business model, but then you're right back into that same thing about, well, they artificially inflate at whatever percent.
Yeah,
So
what I'm reading here, part of the argument with the real estate companies is that the plaintiffs allege that the NAR colluded with several of the brokerages to inflate agents' commissions.
well,
agents'
Washington State's another one. And the Modulin Group actually is in the process of opening a company in Washington State with one of our agents out there. So Washington State's one of the 17 states. So I've not heard anything from the IAR, the Indiana Association. If you are a member of the IAR, or a board member, or know someone, I'd like to know what's our stance going to be. I've not read anything yet from our board.
Let the dust settle and then do something afterwards. I don't know.
The problem with that is January 1 is typically the new year, as we understand, but typically IAR puts out new contracts every January that are tweaked verbiage or something like that. So we're due theoretically for new contracts here in about, 60 days?
Yeah, roughly.
So I would hope they are already thinking about that.
Well, I would hope they would too, because the reality is it's 60 days, but we all know because of the way that December's set up, they probably only got about 40
Yeah.
of
Yeah, because they're not going to
work
do anything the last part of the year.
No.
Unless this warrants
Unless they have to.
Unless this warrants
They're not
enough.
like that.
Yeah.
Well, my concern on the finance side, I've told you from the beginning, is that certain situations will ask buyers of homes to bring more money to the closing to pay the agent. It
So-
helps them.
Before we get into that, let's talk about how we led up to that.
Okay.
Because one of the options that was recommended was, we just roll it into the loan. I was telling him, it's funny how anybody on this side of the table says, well, the answer is to make that side of the table do something different, and we solved the problem. Yep. And that was one of the article's points, which was written by a real estate professional, was real simple, is you just take that 3% and roll it into the loan to pay the agent, becoming a loan fee. So that's how we now then get into what Colin's issues are.
Yeah, I think lenders are close to the limit of risk that they're comfortable with 3% down, 3.5% down, even 5% down. And granted, they force you to buy mortgage insurance and things to protect themselves, but if you're going to bring a 3% down payment and you're going to have a 90% LTV loan, that's a significant risk. I mean, the housing market can fluctuate more than 3%.
Yeah.
So the risk of that person being upside down, like 2008, 10% correction, now so many people are upside down, they can't sell their house without bringing money to the table.
Yeah.
So if you ask the lender, okay, take on another 3%, now you're loaning nearly 100%, or in fact 100%.
But here's, and I've been, since Monday, I've been going back and forth in my mind about scenarios like that.
He said he lost sleep. He lost sleep over it.
I have. The reality is, though, by taking that 3% out and then telling the buyer that they have to bring it or something else, all of our data to this point is based on that 3% being baked into the cost of that house. So really, the lenders aren't out anything. It's the same ratio it's been all along.
Well, I disagree with that, if I'm understanding what you're saying, because here's the reality of the world, and this is where the theoretical meets reality. We can say it's artificially inflated, that 96,000 or that 94,000 to 100 to pay the 6%. When they don't pay that 3% out, sellers are not going to reduce the value of their house.
Correct.
They're just going to say, "Oh, I made 3% more profit."
Yeah.
So while it is baked in, we are so ingrained in baking it in, because it's been 100 years, that it's not going to lower the price of the house. One, they can't, because like Colin, that's what Colin's saying. Somebody that bought a house last year at 96.5% FHA loan, now expect them to lower their value of their house 3%. That's a 99.5%. And the lender's not going to like that. So the reality is they're not going to lower the price.
Well, could we potentially look at lenders capping, saying, we will allow you to borrow up to X percentage to cover your realtor fees, but we're going to cap it at this amount. Keep people from saying, well, I'll work for 5%. Well, we only cover up to 2%.
Banks do that. It's called a cram down.
Yeah.
But yeah, you still got the problem of somebody borrowing 96.5%, and now even if you cap it at 3%, once again, now they're at a 99.5% loan. And Colin's telling you they're not going to be comfortable loaning that.
Well, if the house doesn't appraise at that point specifically.
Well, even if it does appraise, it's still a 99.5% loan.
The way it is now, it teeters on the edge of being too much, because the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac lose tons of money on default. So the risk level to the lender.
Let me throw you the softball question so we can go to the next issue on the loan problem. Lenders do allow sellers to give concessions for certain things. There is a cap on concessions, 3% for conventional and 6% for FHA. So lenders will allow some concessions. So could we roll the 3% as one of those concessions, and it would go in the loan?
Could. In theory, could, but just using our company, about half our buyers put 20% down. The other half put the minimum down, 3%,
right.
3.5%. Many of those first-time home buyers, and these are the ones that will be affected by this, unfortunately, is the entry level and the first-time home buyer and the person that doesn't have a lot of assets saved up because it's early in life. Many of our borrowers barely have enough to bring the $7,000, $10,000 to actually close the deal at all. And oftentimes they're needing concessions to help with the closing costs.
There's where we're at. That's what I wanted to hear.
So in some cases, it will be possible. But in every case, it won't be possible.
So what you're going to see is these buyers that are already using the 3% concession just to buy the home. So you won't be able to roll it in. That's where I wanted to get to.
The other side of that is going to be that the market is going to dictate that the seller is going to have to come down on their price, because people won't be able to afford it if they don't as well.
No, that's going to be the result of all of this. That's why it's going to hurt the market again.
Yes.
But see, some sellers probably can't.
You're right.
Because they went in.
It's going to grind everything even to a further.
Yeah, let's say someone paid $40,000 over the appraised value of the house a couple years ago to get the house.
Yeah.
They aren't going to be able to concede. They aren't going. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, if they're already upside down, and now we're asking to concede 3%.
They already can't sell as it is.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's
a good point. I mean, they're not. And I've told our agents, anybody that was your client in the last 2 years as a buyer probably is not going to be a client for a while.
I mean, they may not be in trouble with their, quote, loan, because the loan is still at a level that makes sense. But all of their saved up cash, instead of paying down their loan, they use to go over the top.
Yeah.
I mean, they're stuck anyway.
Yeah. So, yes, there is a difference between what they paid and what they borrowed. The loan's not in jeopardy. That's why you're not going to see a lot of like what 2008 was. Because if the house loses value, it's their cash that they overpaid that's getting lost. The lender's still good.
Yeah, well, they took the lower of the appraisal or the purchase price. So
damn appraisal gap thing,
Yeah.
which was a completely new thing.
Which we're going to look back in 15 or 20 years and people are going to be like, that is the dumbest idea that anyone ever came up with.
Especially those that did it.
Yeah.
So as this rattles down the pike to reality, it is going to put some pressure on agents to discuss the commission, negotiate the commission, reduce the commission. It'll put some downward pressure on that. When somebody has to bring it out of their pocket versus, well, the sellers will pay it.
So here's another question or another concept that spins us right back into the circle. If the buyer is going to be allowed to negotiate his agent's commission within the purchase agreement, and let's say the seller accepts everything the buyer offers, except I don't want to pay 3% to your agent, I don't want to pay 1%. And the only thing now stopping that deal from going through is that buyer's agent commission.
Well, and that's where it comes back to what I've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, that if you are going to be represent a buyer as a realtor, we have the buyer's agency agreement. People had better start filling that out and getting things set up from the beginning.
So what you're saying is, in a buyer's agent agreement, we have the ability to tell our buyer, up until now, that's the other thing. I just remember what the third thing was my board agreed to.
Yeah.
And would take a side note, remind us to get back to that. There were buyer's agents that were telling their buyer that the commission was free because they were getting paid from the seller. That was a transparency issue that the antitrust lawsuit has, because it's not free. It was artificially inflated that 3%. So that was one of the third thing. Agents are no longer allowed to say that, and that's going to become a violation if they say, oh, it's free to you because I'm being paid over here.
Shouldn't have been saying that anymore.
Paid by
Yes.
someone else is different than free.
Yes.
Still not paid
Yes.
by someone else. It's still paid by them.
Yeah.
They're just not looking at it.
Well, when,
See, that's the crux of the lawsuit.
Yeah.
You're telling them it's free, but it's really paid by them because it was artificially, or not
It's just
artificial,
not paid
it
up
was
front.
negotiated by the listing agent. That was the thing.
Yes.
That was the other thing that the NAR agreed to.
well, that is the antitrust portion of it, is that the buyer's agent doesn't have a chance, or the buyer
yeah.
to negotiate.
So that was
Yeah.
one of the other points. Now, I completely forgot where we were when
We were talking about the buyer's agency agreement.
Oh,
And
yeah. Currently, it says I will collect 3% from you unless compensated from the other side. That's probably going to change because that's not going to be allowed to be compensated from the other side. That's the crux of this. So that's going to say I'll collect 3%. Now, if you can negotiate the 3% from the seller, then they would owe nothing because it got compensated. But what you're saying, which I agree with, is if that seller comes back and says, we agree with all your terms, but we're not paying 3, we're only going to pay you 1, then the buyer agent's going to turn to the buyer and go, okay, if the contract says 3, I'm going to get 2 from you and 1 from him.
Yep.
So
this is the case where the buyer has to bring more money to the table.
and that's right back into his court. Solved it. Put it on his plate.
Yeah. I'm just imagining the awkwardness of that conversation, that the sellers have accepted your offer, they like your price, they're going to fix all the stuff, everything's great, you get the house you want. Problem is, they're not going to pay me.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we have to talk about how to work this out.
Here's an ancillary thing
So
whether
here-
it's good
well-
or bad. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's finish the contract thing because neither one of us, the 3 of us here, are not practicing attorneys.
No.
So if you got a guy in a contract that says you'll pay me because they signed it before you start showing your houses, and then it comes down to that's the only term, and you look at your buyer and go, well, you said you're going to pay me, and all of a sudden he says, no, I'm not going to. Take me to court. Is that deal still going to go through? Is that buyer agent going to be, or is he going to get crammed down and go, oh, okay, I'll do it for 1?
Yeah, cram down is the right word. That's going to be a.
Oh, that's what the banks
a
call it.
swing,
It's called a
yeah.
cram down when
And
bank-owned
here's the
homes
next
were
thing.
doing
Are
it.
you going to start seeing buyer's agents collecting a portion of their money up front while they're showing to make sure that they get part of their money?
I don't know. That's a good idea.
Is it going to, you want to go see houses, it's going to cost you $500 for a
There
$500
was
a month.
there was an agent on the north side of Indianapolis when gas first went to $4, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, that was known for showing houses, but charging the buyer $50 to show them houses to cover her gas. Everybody laughed and everybody said, "Oh, I'd never do that." Things have changed. Maybe that's going to be the
that
key.
Agent still closed houses.
Because it literally could be like an attorney with a retainer.
Yes.
Before I'm your buyer's agent, you're going to put a $500 retainer down to retain my services so that we do. Now, if that happens, there's an advantage there, because how many of us have worked a buyer before where we showed them a house and then they went and wrote it with another cousin that was licensed? Or my neighbor's son just got licensed. I used him to write the offer. Well, if they've paid me a retainer, they probably, won't do that, so it might be beneficial to the buyer's agent that their clients aren't going to go elsewhere, or the buyer's agent's going to make $500 at least for quote-unquote doing nothing because someone else wrote that.
Well, I think the other thing that both, that scenario or just in general having the buyer's agency agreement could do is it could limit the tire kickers to an extent. I mean, we've all worked with people that want to be buyers that are not really buyers, and the reality is if 1 or 2% is really going to be the thing that determines that, they probably shouldn't be buying anyway because they're going to get themselves in a...
That's exactly true, because there was a trick in the property management world. It's not really a trick. As a landlord, one of the things you used to do was take an application fee.
Yep.
Because people that knew they couldn't pass the cut, like bad credit or whatever, would go, "Oh, okay, I'll bring the application back," and then you never hear from them again.
Yep.
And you've dodged dealing with that client because of that application fee. This may work in the same way. If you're really a buyer, then you'd put the $500 down. If you just want to go see some houses, and maybe you might not, that could solve the problem. That also could help you, because now you're not going to get, I got to pre-qual somebody that's just looking. Oh, this guy has put $500 retainer down to me, Collins. He's really a buyer. Go talk to him.
Yeah.
So it might up your conversion rate, because like he's saying, you're going to get truly buyers that are willing to put that retainer fee down.
I mean, in the long run, this could end up being beneficial, but the difficulty is going to be immediately stopping and switching to something different because it's never been done that way.
Yeah.
As far as any of us that are alive have done it. May have been done this way before.
Well, I will tell you, in the commercial brokerage world, this has been common practice since I've been in it 23 years, that the buyer pays, and they have a term for it called YIKIM, YIKYIM. You keep yours, I'll keep mine. Meaning the seller paid his own agent and the buyer paid their own agent. That has been common practice in the commercial world since I've been in it. All right? It's only the residential where NAR's been involved, hence the problem that they're claiming, that the NAR is colluding to do this. Not my claim, their claim.
Yeah.
So
All right.
an hour ago, back to the charging to show houses and things like that. An hour ago, we just talked about the way when you thrust this into transparency is that it's going to expose that some people will be willing to do it without charging a fee. Some will be willing to do a job for less than the next person.
There's always going to be Walmart and Von Maur will exist.
If there's a value, people shop at Von Maur. They think they're getting...
Yeah. Well, let's face it, it's not the same shopper. There are different people that are willing to maybe do some on their own research and pay a little less for the fee. There are others that don't want to do that are willing to pay more. And the problem that I've got with buyer's agency, it's funny because we had this discussion about tipping at a restaurant. As a buyer's agent, I'm going to make a claim that we'll get hate mail from, because I've already got hate mail from my own agent when we talked about this. There is a certain set of steps a buyer's agent does. unfortunately, it's the same set of steps on $1 million home
or 100,000
or a $100,000 home. Now, we can argue that listing's different because the $1 million home, they could say, well, I'm going to have professional photography and lighting and do videos and drone pictures, and I'm going to get you your own website and market in the IBJ. So, yeah, you could say that there's a difference in the listing cost. But as a buyer, you show the house, you write the offer, you negotiate the inspection, and you close. Why do some agents expect to get 20 grand to do those 5 steps on this house and only 2 grand on this house? There's going to be somebody that will say, I will take 2 grand on this house. And those people that, yeah, and you heard that agent yesterday say, well, I wouldn't do it. Okay, you won't. What's going to happen is somebody will, and you're not going to get that buyer now.
Yep.
Because now they're going to look at it and go, well, I can pay that agent for 2 grand or that agent for 20 grand. And let's face it, most of the common public doesn't understand the difference between those 2 agents. And there may not be any difference.
Well, this is a little bit rhetorical, but why is the agent willing to hire the professional photographer and make a website and put all this extra marketing expense into $1 million house and not?
Because they know they're getting paid more.
Why is there more marketing for Cadillacs than there are for Yugos or whatever? I mean, when there's more perceived value, and it is perception. I mean, both vehicles get you where you want to go. Yeah. One just is fancier than the other. Both places are places to live. $1 million or 100,000 serves the purpose that you need it to serve, but there's more perceived value.
But it is also an actual bigger check at the closing.
Yeah. So what you're going to see, and you've mentioned the words, is this race to the bottom. There are agents out there that will do buyer's agency, I predict, for flat fees.
Oh, I think that's coming hardcore.
And one of my agents actually had an argument with another one of my agents one day, and he made a valid point. He said, if I told you I would hire you and pay you $100 an hour, would you take the job? Most people would say, yeah, I'd take a job for $100 an hour. Okay, so you work 5 hours, and I'm making that number up. Why do you expect to get paid $12,000 on $1 million home?
Yeah, that's $2,000 an hour.
Yeah. If you work for $100 an hour, then theoretically you do that buyer's agent for $500.
Yeah.
Why do you, all of a sudden, that agent that we talked to yesterday goes, well, that's not worth my time. Your time's not $100 an hour? Why do you think you're $2,000 an hour?
I think we're going to see that on both sides. Like,
yeah.
From the listing side of things, okay, basic listing is going to cost you $1,500. Do you want a website? That's another $150. Do you want drone photos? That's another $250, and they're going to just pick that menu. I want this, and this, and there we go. And then the percentages are going to go out the window.
There's a website called DIYrealty.com.
Yep.
Basically, that's what it is. They'll do a flat fee listing, they'll do a full list service listing, but they also will give the education to the seller to list their own house.
Yep.
The good thing about some of these flat fee things also, like I was telling this other agent, might be it's all up front.
Yes.
You know, maybe you say to a buyer, hey, I'll do it for $1,000, but it's pay me up front.
Whether it sells or not.
Or X amount of time.
Like the retainer concept.
Yep.
I get the $1,000 up front, and when you pay that, then we'll go find you a house.
Yep.
That could be an option.
I think that's probably where it's going to go in reality.
Yeah. Much of our value, as you guys know, comes from when there's a problem, though, and resolving it. So
yes.
That is the service level that is the ambiguous part.
Unfortunately, buyers don't know that until there is a problem. Right. And once that problem occurs, they're already halfway across the stream with that horse. They're not going to switch horses. So therein lies the problem with this agent going, well, I'm a better agent than that agent. We don't know that until there's a problem.
Yep.
And at that point, it's almost too late. So also another thing that I thought about is that's going to maybe put more effort on the managing broker to make sure that that agent that's quote unquote not as good becomes better. So that could also impact managing brokers to make sure all your agents are good agents. Because now, if there's problems, you don't have a $12,000 paycheck you're getting to. It's $1,000 paycheck.
If you're not getting paid to solve the problem,
yeah.
it still has to get solved.
The other thing that's going to happen with managing brokers is they're going to be looking at their splits and what they're doing with people a lot closer.
Yeah.
Because, how do you tell someone that, I'm an XYZ brokerage and I get 50% and you get 50%. Okay, well, you get. Now I'm taking 50% of you doing work for $1,000.
Yeah.
And then that's going to be an issue.
So that's going to change some of those big box guys.
The big box guys may go bye-bye.
Yeah.
Before this is all said.
Because, like you said, if it's a race to the bottom and buyers start going that flat fee, $1,000, but yet my broker gets 60-40 split, I'm now getting $400 to do the job.
Not a lot of money to split.
Yeah. That's not a lot of money to split.
So isn't the spirit of the lawsuit to protect the consumer and be more disclosure and transparency about the commission, a chance to negotiate? All that thing is meant to protect the consumer. But the truth is, sometimes they need the help and need to pay for the help. So
yeah.
I wonder if that will become part of the negotiation too. Well, we'll do it for a flat fee, but if we encounter a problem with whatever.
Well, the other thing that technically commissions can be paid for is like attorneys is an hourly rate. You might start seeing agents running under billable hours. Hey, we'll do like you said. Here, you pay the $1,000 flat fee, you get one open house and you get 5 hours of consultation. After that, you're going to be billed X dollars an hour. So if there's no problem, it's $1,000. If we run into title issues and I have to make 7 phone calls like attorneys do, now you're also going to get billed another $400 at closing.
Well, the other thing, that could also work on the buyer's side too.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all, not you because you're not a realtor, but we've shown people 35 houses and had them not buy. If we're working under the guise of you're paying me an hourly rate, they're probably not going to go look at 35 different houses. They're going to narrow that down to 2 or 3 because they're going to want to get the most bang for their buck, which may not be a bad thing.
Yeah,
either.
you might start seeing attorneys go to billable hours. Real estate agents go to billable hours. You buy the entry-level package, you get 5 hours and all the negotiation and all that. Anything, or maybe it's houses. First 5 houses we look at's free for $1,000. Every house after that is a $250 add-on. So now you better decide quickly and not, I want to just take a peek at that one, which we've all had that buyer do that. I love this house, but I'd like to maybe take a peek at that one. Okay.
Still takes an hour of our time. We've got to drive over there.
Yeah, it's going to be a billable hour then. I do like that house. Let's put an offer on. Okay. So that may be an answer. Now, first of all, let us say that these are all just hypothetical issues that we are coming up with. But I do like the flat fee billable hour thing. I think that concept you're going to see.
Yeah, I agree.
It's evident that one little regulatory change can cause so many rabbit holes.
Well, that flat fee billable hour thing, no one can say that the consumer isn't getting their opportunity to decide where to spend their money.
Yeah.
I mean, they're making that call all the way through it, how they want to spend it.
We live in an interesting bubble of business, but so overall, do you think this is a good thing for the consumer?
Overall, I think it. I guess I don't have an opinion.
We almost have to have the dust settle, don't we? Because it's going to.
Because you don't know where it's going to land. I think the concept of making it more transparent is a good thing to the consumer.
Conceptually, it's good for them, but I don't think financially it's going to save them any money.
Yeah.
And I think in the long run, it's going to make things more difficult.
And it is going to kind of decide, like you said, where does the dust fall? Where have we decided that the idea of us negotiating it in the purchase agreement, it's just a concept the three of us have come, that may not even be their answer. So that could change it. That could change if it's going to be, because if it's going to be, well, no, you can't do that, you got to get it from your buyer, then we're into the problem of financing. It may ultimately hurt buyers because now they can't really afford the house.
Certainly some buyers
because they can't afford to pay. Especially if you're going with a percentage of that $1 million home. Oh, you're going to pay me $30,000 as a commission. That's not going to fly with a consumer.
No, I mean, I think what's going to happen is whether they change the rules to the point where people have to jump to what we've been talking about or not.
Yeah.
People are going to start making that jump to get ahead of it.
So here's another concept that I came up with as a managing broker dealing with the splits. What you might see, and I actually said this 2 years ago, you might see me hiring agents on salary. And then the company going to the billable hour, much like the attorney model works, where a law firm bills a client and then that attorney that works for the law firm is on $100,000 a year salary, and they are required to do so many billable hours, and if they don't, they get canned. And I've said this 2 years ago, that I predicted there'd be one agent and everybody else would be salaried underneath them, and their job is to close 4 houses this month. If you don't, you're fired. Because then we can start dictating it more like a job and less like an independent contractor. Now, that is a supreme swing in the business model, but I think that could work too.
I think it could too.
And there's already a company out there that has left the NAR that is kind of doing something very similar to that, where they pay their agents to go on a showing. So that might be an answer completely, where the moduling group sends a bill to a buyer based on the hours, and the agent that works for the moduling group is on a salary plus a bonus.
Yeah.
So, but I digress, and I could probably talk on this another hour. But I don't think we need to right now.
Yeah.
Well, we can resume on it next time.
Yeah, I think part 2 of this, or part 3 and 4 and 5, is coming as we see more states modifying, or if the NAR modifies.
Or people just modifying on their own to get ahead of it.
Now,
get away from it.
Is there a chance that this lawsuit doesn't go through and the NAR wins and everything stays status quo? I don't know. Maybe that could be an option.
138 million reasons why I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah. So maybe the U.S. backs off and goes, yeah, that's not an issue. We've decided not to pursue this. And the NAR just stays status quo and everything's fine and nothing changes.
As long as the check gets to the big guy.
Yeah. Whoever the big guy is.
Don't want to insert politics into this.
Yeah. As long as. So maybe there's a small chance that this hour that we've spent is wasted because nothing will change.
Well, from what the little I've been reading, yesterday the NAR's CEO took the stand again.
Yeah.
And the Department of Justice asked the court to delay their acceptance of the settlement for 2 months while they examine this closer.
Oh, so they paid the $138 million, but it really hasn't been approved by the courts yet.
That's the settlement.
Because so that once again gives me further credence to believe that there is something that's going to happen.
Yes.
It feels like this isn't going to just fade away.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
So tune in for part 2.
Yeah, and 3 and
whatever.
And industry professionals should start thinking about this.
Yeah. Any questions? Are we good?
Well, there's plenty of questions. I don't know that we're good, but we're
any answers? Well,
be creative and be smart.
Thanks for joining us on the Five Stones podcast. We invite you back share and like this. And if you are in the field, I would suggest you also share this to someone else that you know is in the field. Because while this seems like it's a bunch of bullshit that we've been saying, these are all thoughts that are going to get you to thinking about what this industry is going to go to. And it seems apparent, based on what Colin just said, that there is going to be a change somewhere in something. See you later.
Harumph.